Hello. Today we are going to cover the global bond sell-off in the US bond market, Abuja Housing Crisis, the World Bank loan cancelled by the Nigerian government, Nigerian GDP growing by 3.89% in Q1 of this year, ECOWAS prediction of 2076, and an update on the AFCON case between Senegal and Morocco. Welcome back to part of the solution. The global bond sell-off in the US stock exchange. US 30 years treasury yield pushes at a 5.2% and Africa pays the price. This is a historic levels. And what this means is, in summary, a bond is basically an IOU, a loan by the government or corporations that says, loan me this money, and at a certain maturity date, they would pay a certain amount of yield back to the bond buyers. But this has a ripple effect because the USD dollars is the world reserve currency. And what does that mean? As a world reserve currency, it sets the interest rate globally. So if the yield of the US bond increases, ceteris paribus, more corporation banks are willing to invest in the US yield, causing other investment cost of capital to go up. In summary, if the ordinary Joe wants to loan money from a bank, they have to pay more money. That's the basic gist of what is happening right now. And over time, the US 10 years to 30 years yield return has had an upward trend. This is not good. We need it to be at a downward trend. And the triggering effect goes to the Strait of Hormuz, the oil price shock, the fiscal debt overload, the debt overload in the US economy, and debt overload in West Asia countries that needs more reserve currency, that's US dollars, because of the blockage at the Strait of Hormuz. Change in fiscal policy fogs. There was a change in the federal chair. Jay Powell stepped out. Kevin Walsh steps in. There's uncertainty with what's going on. And most importantly, mortgage-backed security portfolio managers and banks are selling long-term treasury because they are uncertain of what's going to happen. So that's the summary of what's going on. So how does the bond sell-off hit Africa? On average, sub-Sahara Eurobond coupon return is at 11.6%. Extra annual debt cost for the benchmark extension is extending up to $1 billion and above. Added US interest bills for the fiscal year for 2027, that is causing a huge uncertainty at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange market, the Egyptian exchange market, the Nigerian exchange market, Casablanca exchange market, and Nairobi Security Exchange market. These 5 markets, the primary leaders of stock exchange in Africa, has seen a huge volatility shock as a result of this. And as a result of this, everyone that trades from crypto to commodities to stocks, and because of the problem, bonds are uncertain with what's going to happen. And this is causing a huge disruption in the economy. Because when the Abuja market in Lagos raises the toll to get into the market because of the fuel prices go up, reflecting the refinery crisis in Texas, that is an imported inflation. So from the treasury bond from Washington, D.C. to the oil and gas refinery in Houston, Texas, down to Abuja market in Lagos. This is an unexpected imported tax on the average market person. Just a particular person going in to say, I'm going to buy Gari, has to pay this unforeseen volatility tax. And Nigeria is not a guest at the global financial table. Nigeria actually has a seat on the table because of our population size, our stock market capital volume. I don't know why I was thinking of volatility. Stock market volume. Until we wave our own cloth and we change the narrative, whatever happens in Washington or at the oil and gas in Houston or at the Strait of Hormuz tends to hit the average Joe generally unanticipatedly. And that is what's happening in the capital market. Now we move to Abuja Housing Crisis. A lot of my friends living in Abuja, they keep telling me about the agent fee. I kid you not. And when I mean the agent fee this is twofold. So there's the agent fee to inspect the house, which ranges from 15,000 naira all the way to 40,000 naira. And there is no transparency to identify if the agent that is showing you the house has already been rented to someone or the house is still opened in the market. So you are trading in an untransparent market. And cerebus paribus, say you actually get the house to rent. Regardless of the viewer fee to the agent, you still get to pay the agent between 10% to 20% of the rent. Then there's legal fees that goes from 5% to 15%. Then there's a caution fee that you pay to the landlord, 10% to 30%. And then there's service charge that goes between 5% to 15% of the actual rent. So cerebus paribus, whatever your rent is, you might be up approximately 50% extra. So if your rent goes for 1,000 naira a year, you might end up paying 1,500 that year in unanticipated fee. And the basic gist is the tenants are tired. The tenants' voices needs to be heard, because by the time the tenant is done paying all of these unseen fees, according to the newspaper, nonsense fees, they have nothing to feed on for the rest of the year. Granted, the annual wage or the monthly wage in Abuja is 41% higher than any other state in Nigeria, which is making it the highest place you can earn income in the country. But the rent ratio to income, it is unsustainable for the average Joe. And this is pushing people into the inner cities. And we had already covered about the electricity ban. So there's ban A to ban E. So the farther you go away from the central business district, the less power you have. The less power you have, the less internet you have. Again, it's going back to the invisible apartheid that is going on, or the economic constraint for the average Joe to actually make a living in the country. So how does Nigerian renting system compare globally? In the UK, in 2019, they passed the Tenant Fee Act, where tenant pays €0 to the agent. So the burden of the agent or the body on the agent fees comes from the landlord. In the United States, only New York pays a brokerage fee, and the brokerage fee is highly negotiable. All other states, you do not pay that. It is the landlord to organize that. And for that reason, the landlord has an open policy. On your website, you're able to see available houses, you're able to bid for the houses, and once there's an agreement between you and the landlord, that house goes off the market. That is not the case in Nigeria, because the agent can get you to go view a house that has already been rented and still get viewership fee. In Germany, compensation is split for agency fee, 50-50. 50% is paid by landlord, 50% is paid by the tenant. But in Nigeria, the case is different, and that needs to stop. A solution needs to be added, and that solution, the Lagos state government has proposed a bill that is really helpful. Now we move to the World Bank loan cancellation by the Nigerian government. And this has a lot to do with the power sector reform. So the power sector reform has a lot to do with the new band system of power supply. Now, in all fairness, the people that are in band A, although they have 99% more light and more priority, they are paying about 13%. There is zero subsidies to the people that live in those areas. But to the other side, from band B to band E, they are highly subsidized. So given the fact that they're highly subsidized, maybe, which is unjust, the government is ignoring their priority. I'm not for that. Pay equal taxes, get equal government amenities, security, power, and healthcare, and good roads, So that's the system that has happened with NEPA. And again, I call it NEPA because of the trauma Power Authority gives. Someone was speaking to me and was like, you just call it NEPA. I know the name, and even if I don't, there's Google. And I know the name has been moved to the Power Holding Company of Nigeria and to the Nigerian electricity supply industry and to the power sector. Enough. You're NEPA. You were born NEPA. You will die NEPA in my heart. And as a result, this has become a major contest within the economy in Nigeria. And as a result, in order for the World Bank to fulfill the loan requirement, the World Bank has to inspect the progress of the project. So I would say there's a disconnection of misalignment, misinterpretation between the World Bank's expectation and Nigeria's delivery on this loan. And so both parties decided to part ways. Yes, the World Bank, cerebus paribus, was going to reject giving the Nigerian government additional loan because they are unhappy with the result of the previous payment. And so then the Nigerian government withdrew their application and said they were not going to apply for more loans. So that's the dichotomy of what happened. Both parties left amicably, but read between the lines what was going to happen. And now we move to the Nigeria economy growing by 3.89 GDP. I like to make this statement about the whole issue of stagflation because because of the GDP growing, it doesn't mean the ordinary Joe is doing well in the economy. Inflation is still at 34% in the nation. The official release of GDP or household, the official release of inflation by the government is 15.6%. But the household reality is 34%. And this has increased on a month-to-month basis. So the fact that the Nigerian government is celebrating, of which they should, of a GDP growth, which due to the shortage of oil supply because of the Strait of Hormuz, they've had an increase in their reserve for oil. That means nothing on the grand scheme of things. Now we get into ECOWAS, the forecast of 2076 that claims Nigeria as the world's fifth richest economy. Within the report, it goes that Nigeria will be the fifth richest and most powerful economy, Ghana the 15th richest economy, Cote d'Ivoire the 15th or 4th richest economy, both in 25 years for both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, and Nigeria in 50 years. And this, first of all, I really read the report and I was looking for the economic model. And I want to make this statement about economics in general, capitalism and socialism. Socialism is not logical. Socialism would only work if you care about the person. For example, you take care of your parents. Socialism, because you love them. You're an adult, your parents are older, so you take care of them. You take care of your child as a baby. Socialism, the kid can't work. You have to help. You get pride in doing that. Now, do you have the same pride in taking care of your neighbor's kid when you don't even know the name of the kid? Okay, maybe you might love your neighbor a little. Maybe you know them, you associate with them. But what about someone, you live in Abuja, what about someone from Zamfara? You've never even visited Zamfara. Would you like 10% of your wages to be taxed so that you could pay for them? And whatever you're thinking, that's why socialism is unrealistic, unlogical, and mathematically cannot work. And on the flip side, capitalism, it is logical. It has mathematical models, but it is not the truth. Just because you know about the neo-Keynesian growth theory or neo-Keynesian or neoclassical growth model, that means nothing when you're talking about the individual's life. Logical economics is based on cerebus paribus, keeping all things constant. Life, nothing is constant. In order for us to even start this show right now, a lot of things went wrong and we had to push through it. First of all, my notes got deleted, so I'm just going with a headline and I'm freestyling right now. And my editor is just nodding his head and it's like, interesting. And that's why we're leaning more to economics concepts. So I go through the proposal from the ECOWAS. The author actually had a caveat and he said this will only work if Nigeria can have an inter-trade policy. So what he's saying is it has to be endogenous models to help Nigeria grow. So exogenous does not even work. I find that hard to believe because for growth to happen, the only reason the United States is the world power and holds the US reserve is because of the exogenous variables. Every nation in the world trades with the US dollars. And all of a sudden, an exogenous variable has been like from the Greek, the Roman, the Persian Empire, the Portuguese, the Spanish, English, the Dutch. All of these empires have always relied on exogenous variable. Genghis Khan and the Silk Road had a lot of exogenous variables to help his empire grow. Shaka Zulu, the great empire of Mali, the great empire of Oyo, the Benin Kingdom. But all of a sudden, this miracle of endogenous variable is a huge stretch. I'm not saying the growth of endogenous variable should not be prioritized in Nigeria. Trade route within ECOWAS nation, especially before we even get to the ECOWAS nation, let's figure out trade within Nigeria. It is still difficult for someone to buy goods in Abuja when the seller is in Sokoto State. And you're going to be the world fifth largest economy in 50 years. This is on the assumption, this is a huge assumption that the rest of the world stops growing. They just relax and sleep. And even if they relax and sleep, there's something called compounding interest. That is why a lot of people can retire rich. Because the whole issue of compounding is you work when you're young, and then when you're old, the interest that has compounded and accumulated, you enjoy the spoils. And I'm 100% sure that there is no nation right now living off of its past glory. Everybody is on the AI race. China, US, England, EU, Russia, even Iran that is fighting a war and losing, maybe winning on this economic strategic Moses war strategy. So I really don't know how this is economic feasible or how this is going to work. And now we get to the AFCON case. So far, Senegal wrote an appeal after they were dethroned as African champion. On 7th of May was the deadline for Morocco to submit a written defense as a counter-argument to criticism that's going on. Neither Senegal appeal nor Morocco counter-arguments can be found. I have no idea what was going towards my face. Neither can be found. So there's a summary of what we assume Morocco's argument and counter-argument would be, and there's a summary of what Senegal's pure argument would be, but I couldn't find the document. Now, I could be searching wrong, but I did, and I couldn't find it. And now, post May 7th, a panel review submission has been made. Oral hearing dates has not been given. So, according to their rule in Switzerland, there might not be oral arguments. So right now, one of the most controversial or the most controversial court case in sports in Africa is not even held in an African court. This again makes no sense. There's no reason why this is taken outside Africa for deliberation or for a decision. This should be made by a board of panel or the board of committee members by Africans for Africans. So right now we have to wait between tomorrow, maximum of 12 months from now, to get a final decision, and the decision will be final. There's no transparency in what's happening. There's no open court case for us to read. I hope their decisions will be clear and have clear justification of how they came up to that decision. Because if the decision goes either to Morocco or goes straight to Senegal, this will not help the integrity of the AFCON tournament or any sport in Africa. It will be seen as a joke. Imagine the Europe League or Latin American League having this exact controversy. Do you think they will bring it to a court in Africa for decision making? Do you even think that will cross their mind? Like, where we should take this for fair judgment? Africa. And then when it's Africa having this huge controversy, we cannot make a decision that is fair, just, and transparent?